One, two, one, two, three, four.
Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is David Wilkinson. David is the editor-in-chief of the Oxford Review. He is also acknowledged to be one of the world's leading experts in dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty and developing emotional resilience. David teaches and conducts research at several UK universities and is the author of the Ambiguity Advantage, okay, if I get that out, What Great Leaders Are Great At. So, David, I'd like to welcome you, and can you start out with maybe that short elevator speech about the Oxford Review and what is it exactly?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on. So basically, if you've got like anything to do with organizational and kind of human development, we kind of make you the most up-to-date or the most impressively and ridiculously up-to-date person in the room, particularly if you're a leader or a manager in human resources, in organizational development, or interested in change or learning and development. And basically what we do is we get the very latest research findings to you, and not just any old research findings. It's all the stuff that's practical and actionable without all of the academic jargon. So that's what we do, is we keep people up to date with the very latest research.
Well, that academic research, I mean, is it just from the UK? Is it, are you reviewing 100 articles or whatever a month?
We take research from all around the world. We search research from all around the world. There's about 247 different research databases, and we look into them all. There's about 78,000 peer-reviewed, so these are academically peer-reviewed papers published every month. That's about 2,600 a day. So we've got an algorithm that goes off and searches those and looks for things to do with organization and human development. And then what we do is, once we've got the list every day, we go through that list and we find things that are going to be useful to people like consultants, leaders, managers, HR, and things like that. And then when we find those, we then turn those into human, so that normal people can read them and get something out of them. Basically, what we're trying to do is kind of bridge that gap between academia and practitioners.
Is it something that I could just Google and find out, or I mean, isn't that coming up on my Google space?
Yes, some of it will, a small bit. Good luck in understanding it, largely because it's written by academics for other academics, particularly peer-reviewed research. One of the problems is actually getting access to peer-reviewed research. Most of it's kind of locked away in university libraries, and you've actually got to be in a university to get hold of it. You can get access, but a lot of these journals are going to charge you $50 for the privilege of getting hold of it. Now we've got access to it all. We're quite happy to pay for it because we're an organisation, so we can get hold of just about anything. And then what we do is as I say, we turn it into human. But there's an awful lot of it, and the trick is finding out exactly what you want and kind of keeping up to date with it.
Well, how did it come about? I mean, how did the Oxford Review start?
Yeah, by complete accident. About 2 years ago now, this fall, I was writing a book, and I took a sabbatical from my consultancy and lecturing work. And in order to keep in touch with people, what I was doing was I had a small list of probably about 300 people that I knew, and as I was finding interesting things in the research that was going into the book, I'd just fire little snippets out to them on an email list and say, hey, you might be interested in this. Largely just to keep touch with people whilst I was on the sabbatical, because, as a consultant, people think that you've just disappeared off Earth if you don't keep contact with them. Came Christmas 2 years ago, and I ended the sabbatical. The book was largely finished, almost, still isn't. I just sent an email out saying, thanks for your patience, I'm back. And I'll stop all these annoying emails. And on Christmas Eve, I got 300 emails saying, no, don't stop the emails, please. We love them. So my brain was churning all over Christmas Day. And then on this is how sad I am. On Boxing Day, I sent out another email saying, okay, if you want me to keep doing this, are you willing to pay? And again, and this was Boxing Day night, so I'm not the only sad person around. I got a load more emails back saying, yeah. And therefore, in January, I started up the Oxford Review.
So exciting, because everybody looks for a target market and they have this idea of a product and everything, and you kind of did it in reverse, right?
Yeah, complete accident. And I wasn't even looking for anything, really. I was quite happy doing my consultancy work, doing my lecturing, my research and things like that. But it's kind of overtaken my life now. I love it.
This past year, you've been what I would call in a private beta membership of sorts. Why did you do that? I mean, why did you kind of keep it, I don't want to say quiet, because you've been out there, but why did you kind of keep it closed?
The first thing that happened was I actually had an open membership. But what started to happen was people who obviously I didn't know who were signing up, but they were starting to ask for pieces of research that really wasn't to do with organisation and people development. They were asking for things like, well, somebody wanted the economic history of Malaysia, and someone else wanted some research on some disease or other, and it was getting a bit distracting. So I decided to shut the membership down and go through an interview route where I spoke to everybody. Now, what's happened as a result of that is we've started to grow a really nice kind of community of practice of organisational developers, organisational change people, HR, the whole kind of mix of people that are involved in organisation people development. The beauty of that is I know them all now because I've spoken to everybody. And it's really good because I actually know what they want. And they talk to me because we've already broken the ice. So it was largely just to stop a problem, but it's become a real strength of the Oxford Review.
How often is it published? Is it just come out as a newsletter? What is it?
Yeah, okay. Largely, we publish it continually. So every week, members get between 1 and 3 research briefings. So we reduce everything down to a briefing for members. So every week, members get between 1 and 3 research briefings of stuff that's just been published. And then once a month, we have a thing called the Oxford Review, which is a PDF that goes out that's got between 12 and 16 other research briefings in it. And on top of that, we also send out a series of infographics. So if some research kind of lends itself to a more pictorial version, now those go down particularly well in organisations and with managers and on kind of management courses and things. And then on top of that, we also produce the odd research video briefing, and we're starting to get more into that. And then on top of that, there's the odd special report. So I've just written one all around culture change, for example, and the problems with culture change, because most leaders and people in organisational development completely misunderstand what it takes to change a culture. So we had a look at that from the research point of view and what the research says about culture change. And then a little bit later on this month, we're going to start some live webinars for members with researchers. So I'll interview the researcher and then the members can actually talk to them live. A little bit later on next year, we're going to start getting people involved in communities of practice within the membership.
Sounds a lot like a book summary, but on... when you're looking at a book summary, but basically on research articles, is there any analogy to that would work?
Kind of. We go into a bit more depth. So, because basically what we want is to make sure that the practitioners are up to date with the latest thinking. So it's not just a kind of, this is a nice book type thing. We look at the research. We have a quick explanation of what the research is without all of the jargon. And then what we do is we summarize the findings. So it's kind of a cut down paper, but in human form, so that you don't have to wade through pages and pages of academic language. So it's quite a bit more than just a book review.
One of the things I think when people hear of the Oxford Review, okay, the immediate thought, especially in the States, probably will be the Harvard Review. Okay, is this a UK version, or what? Is there a very distinctive difference between the two?
Yeah, there's quite a significant difference. So the Harvard Business Review tends to focus on, well, it focuses on kind of opinion pieces from gurus in the market, so largely consultants and people like that. And then they produce small pieces of research. Everything that we do is all research based. So just to give you an example, so in academia, for example, when I'm teaching students and when I'm working with researchers, what we do is we look at how good a piece of research is, and there's some very kind of simple heuristics that you can use, some simple ways to see based on the kind of journal that it comes from. So in academic land, for example, there's a thing called an impact factor. Now, the impact factor tells you, it's a very simple measure of how many times a journal is cited in other people's research, just as a kind of level of quality. So kind of right at the top, one of the top journals is Nature. So if you get an article published in Nature as a researcher, you've kind of made it. And if you're not a professor already, you will be very shortly. It's very difficult to get into. It's a very stringent peer-reviewed process. You're going to be, your research is going to be criticized and looked at by some of the best brains on the planet. So to get past them and get it published is really something. Now, their impact factor at the moment is around about 47.9. The Harvard Business Review impact factor, and this may surprise people, is 0.72, largely because it doesn't produce research. What it's doing is it's producing opinion pieces. Now, we're very different. All we do is we review research. There's no opinion pieces at all in this. It's all you get is the absolute research findings. So you're on a good basis when you're using the stuff. And it's quite impressive to actually reel off pieces of research when you're working anyway.
Well, I don't think most lay people, okay, really understand some of the rigors of academic research, okay, that takes place. Is there a way that you could just explain that briefly? Because I'm not sure it can be brief even, okay?
Yeah, no, we can do that. So the idea of research is it's meant to be as unbiased or as objective as possible. Now, there's no such thing as 100% objectivity because we're human beings, but there are steps that we can take to make sure that what we're doing isn't very biased. So we want to make sure that the research is both what we call valid, in other words, that we're using the right kind of instruments for that piece of research, and it's reliable so that we can repeat it and we can see whether those findings actually are repeatable. And that's what we're kind of looking for. We're looking for rigor within the research. Now, what we find is that then we do the research, we publish the research, and the reason for publishing the research in an academic journal is for other academics to look at it and say, yes, we agree with it, or no, there are holes in it, there are weaknesses in this research. And it's by that kind of peer review process that academics get better and better and better at doing the research and making sure that they're researching things that have got some gravity and some usefulness. Now, the peer review process is you submit a paper to a decent journal, and then other academics will have a look at it and they'll criticize it. And they'll say, hang on, this isn't actually measuring what you think it's measuring, or that your statistics are flawed, or the whole premise is flawed, or there's some other evidence that you haven't looked at. And it kind of keeps us academics on our toes, as it were. Now, in non-peer-reviewed journals like the Harvard Business Review and magazines and things like that, that doesn't happen. There's an editorial, they're trying to sell a magazine. Peer-reviewed papers, on the other hand, what they're trying to do is make sure that the research is the best research because they want to publish the best research. And therefore we have this reviewing process, this peer reviewing process, and basically it's kind of criticizing you, and it's quite a tough process, particularly if you're just starting out. But I've been doing research for years, and I'm still there are papers that go in and come back with some horrible comments on them. So you've just got to get used to it.
Yeah, you have to be kind of hardened to that, right? You got to be ready to take it.
Yeah, but you don't last very long if you don't.
Yeah. Well, you know what that sounds an awful lot like, and I'm a lean guy, okay, but it really sounds like the 8-step problem-solving process a little bit. PDCA is that you go through that iteration of solving a problem, developing countermeasures, okay, and from a business, standpoint, it's the PDCA process. I mean, PDCA isn't new.
Yeah.
It's been around since Aristotle. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, okay. But there are a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And both lean and research are learning processes. We're trying to get better and better and better. With lean, we're trying to reduce waste if it's within an organization, and get the processes better, get them performing better, get us performing better. And research is exactly the same. It's a learning process. We're trying to get better and better. We're trying to produce better and better research that's dealing with the things that actually need to be done. So we have this kind of critical approach to it. And it really keeps you on your toes, because you're not going to get published if you produce a load of rubbish. Whereas with a magazine or something like that, you're going to get published if it sounds good.
One of the questions that I have to ask while we're talking about opinion and the rigors of peer review, and you're the editor. You have incredible influence over what goes out. What stops the Oxford Review just being a mouthpiece for your views?
The members. They'd probably cut my legs off. We've got a really active membership, which is really lovely, because they give me feedback on a fairly ongoing basis. So almost daily I get emails from people saying they're working on something, this is what they want. They certainly tell me if they think that there's something that was below standard, although luckily I haven't done that for a while. Yeah, they really are the guides of this. And because we've got a close connection and I talk to them all and they talk to me, I find out what they really want. It kind of guides where we're going. So what they'll do is they'll send me an email or phone me up and say, look, we're looking at this. What have you got on it? So we'll go off and have a look at it. And, if it go out to the rest of the membership, we're quite happy to do it.
Can you give me a couple of examples that are people that are using the information and how they're using it?
Yeah, sure. We've got quite a few. We've got quite a range. So we've got large organisations. So, for example, the Bank of England. They use it. We help them set up a series of communities of practice for their managers, because they're spread out all over the place. And they feed the materials into the online communities of practice to seed discussion about certain management topics or organisational development topics. We have a large construction company. It's kind of a global construction company. They use the materials. They spread it across all of their managers to see discussions about best practice, just in terms of not only in terms of management and leadership, but also in terms of where the organisation's going, the culture of the organisation, and things like that. Right through to coaches and consultants who use it on a one-to-one basis, where their clients working through something, and they'll have some bits of evidence from the reviews that we've done, and they'll use that to seed a discussion about where to go next. And then there's a whole range. We've got kind of quite a large corpus of training companies who use the materials. Largely, it seems to be marketing. They kind of write blogs around it, which we're quite happy with. But they also use it in face-to-face training. Some of the things that we've done, we've actually produced slide decks as well as the infographics and things. So they'll use those directly in their training, which is fine. So we've got a really wide range of people. Oh, and the other people, and this kind of surprised me at first, but it doesn't anymore, is we've got quite a lot of lecturers in universities around the world using the materials, largely because the materials kind of bridge that gap, particularly for undergraduates, between real hardcore peer-reviewed stuff and they're struggling to understand, and something that's understandable. And because it's based only on the research, then it's usable for academic purposes. So we've got quite a lot of lecturers who use it in their classroom teaching.
So I also just noticed that you published something called the Annual Review. What is that book, and is that available to even non-members or just members only?
Yeah, no, it's just been published. It's just going out on Amazon. It should be there now, both amazon.com.co.uk and all the rest of the Amazons. And basically what it is, it's a collection of 250 practical research findings about organizational and people development. So you kind of get it in a condensed book form. and it's really useful. We've had quite a few. It went out to our members, and they've all had it. They're really enjoying it. It's very useful.
What is your vision? I mean, 4 to 6 years from now, what do you hope that Oxford Review is going to be utilized for?
It's kind of the way it's developing and growing is that I think there's more room for this kind of activity of kind of closing the gap between academic research and the practitioner in all sorts of topics. But the Oxford Review itself, I think, is becoming more and more mainstream. So, as I say, we're already getting into some very large organizations, and they're starting to take it very seriously. I get a lot of requests for talking at conferences and things around evidence-based practice. I do a lot of work. I'm an ex-police officer. I do a lot of work in this country with the police and helping them around developing evidence-based practice. Health services around the world are using evidence-based practice, and we get quite a lot of health organizations are subscribing. So it's becoming more of a community, and that's where I see it developing. It's becoming a real kind of community, but an extended community across the world with lots of kind of communities of practice, people talking, sharing practice, but evidence-based practice, not just a series of things that you can find on Twitter and LinkedIn. Not denigrating those, there's some good stuff on there, but there's also quite a lot of rubbish as well. And just getting that kind of the quality in the evidence base and people thinking about where their practices are actually coming from, and whether it's actually got some foundation or not. And so that's where it's kind of going, and it's developing quite nicely in there. And so the next stage is really around developing communities.
Buzzwords of like fake news is that it's difficult to distinguish from that a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is, and that's the same in the kind of leadership management, organizational development spaces, largely because there's you go on to Twitter, for example, and you see a lot of the stuff that is shared, a lot of the infographics that are shared, the more misinfographics. They're not actually based on any kind of research. They seem to be based on somebody's idea as they got out of the shower this morning. And it may be right, but it may not be. And actually, it may be taking you down quite a dangerous line. And it's getting to that, where is our information coming from? And is it based on good research? And if it's based on good research, then we can actually start to move forward and we can start to learn. But if it's just based on somebody's opinion, does it really fit? Is it going to work here? At least you're on a more firm footing if it's research based, and that's what we're trying to achieve, really.
Well, and I think of the article that I read on your website about lean, and it was interesting because the perspective of it, okay, was dead on, okay, for one. And the perspective was very good for, on the article from it. But it was, how I want to say, it was a little different than what you would get from maybe that lean Toyota manufacturing type internal person, okay? So it seemed to be a little more...
If the researchers have got some kind of skin in the game, if there's something that could cause a bias in terms of most peer-reviewed papers, they've actually got to declare it. So we know whether there's a bias built in there. They know whether they're selling their company's stuff or not. Academic researchers aren't actually allowed to do that. So it's a lot more objective. So therefore it looks a little kind of helicopterish, but it's very useful for that because it gives you really good overview of what's going on. And a lot of the research is like that. You kind of get this real sense for either what's going on around the thing or what's actually underpinning it. So some of the research is looking at kind of causal factors. And that becomes quite important because you can actually start to see some of the connections. And you can see statistically whether there really are connections or not. And some of the research that I read, it surprises me because as a psychologist, I've built up some assumptions, but some of the latest research is really challenging some of the things that I learned as an undergraduate and kind of changing the way that I'm thinking. And it's that, that's a learning journey, and it's good for that because it challenges you.
Well, and, I'm going to go back to when we think of trees or triz, whatever you want to use it, they came up with some, great research on invention and basically narrowed it down to, I think, 140 different things. And, that you can go in, you can create contradictions from, you can build evidence of your new idea very well. And it's a very rigorous approach to innovation. And that's why I don't think it's that popular. But on the other hand, what the Oxford Review, and I think you may even claim it somewhere on your website, is that most of these problems even have been solved before, okay? Why not use the information and the research based on them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Quite a lot of people in organizations and consultants and things are trying to reinvent the wheel. And actually, most of the things that we're trying to do have been done somewhere else before and have been rigorously researched. So, you've had somebody objectively looking at whether it works or not. And yet many organizations don't use that kind of data. And it's a real shame because it can give you a real step up. In fact, it can do quite a lot of the grunt work for you, where you're actually coming to a project already armed with loads of facts and lots of research evidence, so you know where to look and you know where you're going. And certainly some of the most impressive consultants that I've seen are very much research-based consultants. They know their job and they know what they're talking about and they know what the research says. And once they kind of know that, they're very impressive people. But they can come in and they can diagnose accurately because they're thinking from a research perspective. And I think that's incredibly powerful these days, rather than coming in just based on our experience. And I certainly know quite a lot of the research goes a bit against some of the experience that I've had. So, and it's very, very useful.
Well, is there something that I did not ask that you'd like to add to this conversation?
No, go to the website and try it. There's lots of kind of sign-up things. There's quite a lot of material. There's a good blog. Go and have a look. I think that's the only thing. Okay,
well, how do I find out more? Tell me what the website is.
Okay, yeah, if you go to all the W's, oxford-review.com, go there, have a look around the blog, have a look around. There's a whole load of downloads. You can sign up for the blog posts. They're posted at least once a week, usually twice a week. But also there's lots of kind of freebies, free research briefings and things like that you can sign up for. Okay. So we're very generous.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to thank you very much, Dave. Podcast will be available on Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 website. So I would like to thank all the listeners for listening.
Thank you, Jeff.